Hello, I'm Helen Green from LSE Life. What if you knew what you wanted to get out of a text before you even turned the first page? Wouldn't that help find the most relevant parts of the text, or prioritize the sections to read first? Academic texts can be long and dense. If you show up and have no idea of what you want from the text ahead of time, you might feel a little overwhelmed once you see everything that's on offer. This is why I suggest you take a little time every time you sit down with a text to set some reading goals, to think about and write about a few specific things you'd actually like to learn from the text. This is a way to take an active role in focusing your attention and setting priorities in your reading. And that's what we're going to try today. The overall question to keep in mind as you set your reading goals is, why am I reading this text? Is the text an essential reading or a further reading? Or maybe it's something someone recommended or a reference from another reading. This will influence how much attention you dedicate to the text. What are you using the text for? Do you need to prepare for a lecture or for a discussion in a class or a seminar? Is the author going to do a public lecture and you just want to get familiar with the ideas? Or are you going to write an entire essay or conduct some research based on the text? And what about you? Is this something entirely new for you? Or is it a familiar topic? Do you just want to cover the basics? Or do you want an in-depth understanding? Sometimes the basics are enough, and sometimes you'll want to know more. But realistically, not everything in every text is equally relevant all the time. What do you want from the text? These are your decisions to make. And I think it's important to think about what you'd like to accomplish and why you're spending time and energy on the text before you even open the first page. Because if you don't, the text might take over. It's easy to lose focus and get caught up in the minute details of what authors present. A lot of students tell me that they're worried they're going to miss some important detail, so they feel like they must read everything. But in an attempt to get everything, you risk missing the big picture, and ironically, getting almost nothing. I call this zombie reading. I think it's the most common difficulty for readers who don't yet have much experience working with academic texts. Zombie reading is when you're looking at every single line of the text, one after another, maybe copying down pages and pages of notes, only to realize that you've been working for hours, but you have no idea of what you've been reading. We've all been there. It's easy to do. But the good news is that having your reading goals clear from the beginning and next to you while you work with the text is one way to help prevent zombie reading. Let's give it a try. Our aim for this exercise is to set reading goals. We're going to formulate and write down some specific questions or relevant bits of information to find in the text. And we're going to use 1 week from a course outline to try this out. There's a link to that outline on the LSE Life Moodle page that you can use, but I also have a copy here. So take a look at this and imagine you are about to attend this lecture. Think about what you know about this topic and about what you don't know. Ask yourself what you're most interested in. What connections could you make between this week of the course and other weeks? Or connections with other things you've studied, or jobs you've done, or experiences you've had. One of the most important features of learning independently and thinking critically has to do with making connections and questioning the ideas you encounter. Studying at LSE involves looking for explanations, and this requires being curious in a proactive way. Keep that in mind as you look at this course description, and whenever you look at your own course descriptions. Look out for anything the teacher mentions you should be able to do once you've taken part in the lecture and the discussion and you've done the readings. Pause here and take a few minutes to think of some specific questions, definitions, or pieces of information you'd like to find in a text before going to this lecture. Try to write down 3 or 4 reading goals that you could set. Okay, How did you do? Here are a few reading goals you might have come up with. What is the author's definition of intelligence? In working with texts critically, both when you're reading them and especially when you're writing them, it's important not to take keywords for granted. Different authors will have different definitions of important concepts. Making a note of these differences that you come across in the definitions will help you make sense of the debates and the disagreements in your field. Are there different kinds of intelligence? What exactly is meant by IQ, and how is it tested? And is that the same as measuring intelligence? Are there cross-cultural aspects of this to consider? Now, I don't mean that these are the right reading goals. Every reader can have different goals. And in fact, the same person will probably set different goals on different days, even with the same text. If you're reading a text to attend a lecture in the 9th week of Michaelmas term, MT9 in this example, but then you had another look a month later to write an essay, or maybe in 6 months to revise for an exam, you'd certainly have different reading goals each time. Later, you'll have different knowledge and different interests and different reasons for reading. In another practical exercise that's available on the LSE Life Moodle page, we look at ways to skim and map a text before you read, which also comes from this example course. If you'd like a sneak preview, here's the text that we used for that exercise. Henrik and Muthukrishna, 2016. Here's a quick glance at one part of that particular text, where you can get an idea of what the text has to offer and how it might correspond to some of the reading goals you've just written down. Just pause here if you're interested in reading this more closely. But you'll have a chance to explore the whole article in detail in the mapping exercise in the other video. So here on the left, I've noted down some reading goals that I set based on the course description that we just looked at. And on the right, I've put down some of the results of the mapping exercise. Notice that if you had been on the lookout to learn something about IQ testing and how that's related to intelligence, well, you'd be able to find that in one specific section of the essential reading for the course. If you noted cross-cultural variation as something you're interested in, well, there's a section of the reading on how different languages might be particularly relevant. So I hope you can see here, by doing both of these pre-reading activities together, setting reading goals and mapping a text, you can begin to make connections between what you want and what the text has to offer before you begin really getting into the text. Do have a look at the mapping exercise to explore in more detail these two complementary ways to prepare to do academic reading. Taking a few minutes to set some specific reading goals before you jump into a text can help you make the most of the time you spend reading. Remember, academic texts are complex and dense. Usually, there's more in a text than you actually would ever need on any one day. A bit like a supermarket. This is the work of a photographer called Andreas Gursky. If you've already tried the text mapping exercise, you'll know that your map is like those signs in the supermarket that tell you where things are, the frozen foods, the tinned goods, the drinks, the snacks. By setting some specific reading goals, well, you now have a shopping list. And just like the supermarket, this can save you time and energy. And it can help you make sure that you have something useful when you're done. I think setting reading goals combined with the mapping exercise before you get started with the text is an excellent way to combat zombie reading. Now, there are a few things to note. First, it's not because your goal is on your list that you necessarily find it in the text, but that's all right. Even if it's not there, by setting the reading goal, you'll be more mindful of what you're looking for in other texts too. Second, you might come across ideas in the text that you weren't aware of while you were trying to set your goals, and of course those can be interesting too. Reading is also about discovery. And on a very practical note, remember that you don't have to set the goals, map the text, and then do the reading all on the same day. Working with academic texts take a lot of time and energy. You might set your reading goals and map the text for 15 or 20 minutes whenever you have a little bit of time. Then you can use them to really get into the text, say the next day, when your mind is fresh and you have more time. Try working in different stages just to see what works best for you. And in any case, there's no one right way to read for academic work. The idea is to take time to think about yourself, your context, and what the text has to offer, and how all this can come together. When you've given some thought to at least some of these things before you dive into the details of a text, you'll be more prepared to make decisions about how to use it. Everyone has their own method and rhythm to work with academic texts, and no one exactly knows how to do it the first time they try. Different types of texts will lend themselves to different approaches. Experiment with these ideas and try to be confident that the more you do it, the better you'll get. If you have questions, just get in touch with us. You can always book an appointment to have a chat with an LSE Life Study Advisor. Visit our website to find out how to book a one-to-one session. And while you're there, you can also sign up for our weekly newsletter. And that way, you'll receive an invitation to our workshops on reading and other important skills you'll need at LSE. Or, if you'd just like to get in touch, send us an email at lselife@lse.ac.uk. In the meantime, I wish you all the best with your academic reading and with your studies at LSE.